Psychologists of Reddit. What's one thing a patient has told you that caught you off guard, or vice versa? Patient's perspective? My therapist once abruptly ended our session after telling me I needed to go to the ER. I had been in a car accident the day before and had an undiagnosed concussion that was pretty bad. I was so out of it I didn't even realize I was out of it. He later told me I was talking about inappropriate topics. I was so embarrassed I didn't ask what I specifically talked about. I didn't want to know at that point, and wasn't making much sense. I'm just glad he recognized I was off that day and helped me get to the hospital. Man, concussions are heck. I've had a few. I've got one sister-in-law who hasn't spoken to me since I was chatting with her via Skype chat while recouping in the hospital. I don't even remember WTF I said. When I was in first or second grade, the school counselor fell asleep when I was describing a bullying situation that I was in. I was so young that I didn't know how to respond, so I just sat there in his office until he woke up. Was talking to my school counselor about some mental health issues and told him that I like playing card games to take my mind off of it. But the man literally opens his cabinet and pulls out a briefcase full of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'm a massive nerd. And says Suwoo. Wanna play? Don't get me wrong, but this guy had a lumberjack beard, was fit and looked more like an athlete than a counselor, so I was shocked. Got over my problems and played every Wednesday against him. You activated his trap. I paid and sat through an entire session of therapy during which my therapist ranted as to how great of a career he could have had as a stand-up comedian and how much he regrets his current profession. I kinda agreed with him near the end. Except, it wasn't funny. I had a therapist tell me when I was a teenager that she didn't know what else to do to help me because it seemed like I already understood everything pretty well. This was after my overbearing and crazy helicopter mom dragged me in for being depressed. Then she switched to therapying my mom, and my mom quickly was in tears because she has the emotional strength of a child and wanted it to be about me when it was actually all about her. I knew exactly why I was depressed. I was stuck by myself in the middle of nowhere with her crazy butt. No personal space, no ability to get away, not being able to say no, her getting jealous of my friends when I spent time with them. It would make anyone depressed. She didn't even let me sit with the therapist by myself. My mom did this and would change my doctors because they wouldn't tell her what we talked about in sessions. Then she found one who put me on all sorts of meds for depression, anxiety, and sleep. She's completely dependent and has turned into an ever bigger mess. She said, "You don't have to forgive someone, especially when they were so cruel and are not sorry." Shocked the heck out of me, as any therapist before that tried to get me to forgive, but I can't. I live with it and I don't think forgiving them would bring me any kind of peace. There's a difference between forgiving and moving on. You can't deny what the person did or how it affected you, but you can change how you react in the future to the trigger. There's people I will never forgive in my life, that I refuse to see or even talk about, but that doesn't mean I haven't been able to move on with my life through therapy. First time I saw a counselor, he was looking over my paperwork and said he could tell from my handwriting the I was good in bed. I kid you not. I was so caught off guard, all I could say was I think I am. So young and not assertive at all. Found out he got in trouble for an inappropriate relationship with a client. But it really screwed me up for a bit, him saying that because I have problems setting boundaries with men. That counselor is a predator. He took advantage of being in a position of power over a vulnerable person. I hope you've found ways to build healthy boundaries. Told mine I had seen him grabbing a drink at the same place I used to go get drunk before COVID. He stared at me like I had discovered something NASA was hiding. We had a laugh and he confessed it. Context: I had huge drinking problems and he told me he didn't like to drink at all. That's actually pretty funny. I did most of my training in a pediatric hospital. One of my patients, young adult, with relapsing leukemia, cancer since young childhood, wanted to go to an outdoor festival with their significant other. The oncologists were adamant that due to the patient's low white blood count and current course of treatment, they shouldn't let them go. Basically, if that person caught an infection it would kill them. The patient was understandably so, and said something like, "I've had this disease since I was a child. I know I'm going to die soon. I'm going to the concert whether you like it or not, and if I die, then at least I'll do it on my own terms." It's always quite moving when a young person expresses their own mortality and confronts it head on. I had such admiration for that person. My therapist and I would end every appointment with a discussion of the latest Game of Thrones while it was airing. A great way to end things. Even the crappy end of the show got plenty of lighthearted ribbing. It was great BC, it wasn't too personal, and after talking about sex abuse for an hour I could leave without being such a sad sack. Dude, that's awesome. I want your therapist, even though I don't need one. I was in my second ever session, which coincidentally was right after my nan's funeral. I was talking about some stuff that had happened with my sister, who I had already said was probably my biggest issue, and he asked, why is this person in your life? Why do you want to continue a relationship that hurts you so much? Do you actually want this relationship? I was floored. It had never occurred to me that my sister didn't get a place in my life by default because family. I can tell you how much this improved my life. Left both my mother and her reincarnate, my sister, behind years ago. Can't express how much better my life is without them in it. Rotten is rotten. My most recent therapist experience lasted for 2 sessions only. Both times, every time I'd discuss an issue I was having, my therapist would say, OMG me too. Like, I'm here for you, help me. If you're just gonna say that, I can have this conversation on my own. The last session the therapist said, if we met outside of this scenario we'd be really good friends. That was it for me. If I wanted someone to respond with me too when I say I want to die, I'd just go talk to my friends. I'll never forget my first day of therapy. My therapist asked me if I had ever been abused as a child. I replied, no, I had a normal childhood. I had everything I needed: food, shelter. I mean, my mother slapped me and would tell me to kill myself, and my dad would drag me by the hair everywhere and pull my hair out. But no, nothing abusive or anything. There was at least 30 seconds of dead air between us as I watched her blink while trying to figure out how to respond to what I said. Eventually she put down her file, crossed her legs and said, my dear, that is abuse. My world came crashing down all around me at that moment. For so many years I had buried my feelings about what they'd done so deeply that I'd managed to convince myself that what they'd done wasn't wrong. Less than a year later I was diagnosed with PTSD and panic disorder from the trauma, and I cut off all communication with my parents. I'm a clinical psychologist working on the back end of my postdoc. I work predominantly with acute adolescent presentations such as chronic self-injury or sexual trauma. I'm so used to the young people I help hating themselves. It hurts a lot inside, but I firmly believe in catharsis through positive regard and validation. So as we do our therapy, I often sprinkle in comments here and there about some of the things about them that I admire, respect, or appreciate. Things like their perseverance, their kindness, or their passion for an interest of theirs. I'm always so caught off guard when they agree with me or say something nice about themselves that it's really the only time I find myself slightly tearful in session. I'm always so dang proud of them and it hurts to hear the depths of their self-hatred. Those little moments of growth make me feel like it's the first warm day after winter. During my first and only session with a particularly memorable child psychologist, he referred to me as a miserable bee. It was true, but he didn't have to call me out like that. It's beautiful. Had a therapist tell me to make a frick budget. Hear me out, lol. He said you only have so many fricks to give before you blow. So just like with money, you need to budget it out. Start with things you have to give a frick about. Kids, work, health, and then cross the things you dislike giving a frick about. Like people's opinion of what you wear. Off the list and don't give a frick about that crap. This was an older gentleman who was cool but for the most part very well spoken and didn't cuss. Hearing him say I needed to stop spreading my fricks so far made me die of laughter and immediately feel better. To this day I still have a frick budget that I do every month religiously, and it has taken so much stress off my shoulders. This is one of the greatest things I have ever heard. I had one tell me I needed to learn to bite the bullet, which turned out to be good advice, even if it was blunt. Patient here. In response to me telling my therapist that I was prescribed Wellbutrin for my depression anxiety, my therapist stated that it was a medication that a lot of adults with ADD see a positive effect with. It threw me off for a second and I was like, that's cool, Why do you say that? Therapist. Because you have ADD? Me. What? I do? Therapist. Yes. You present very typical ADD for adults. Me. Therapist. I thought you knew already. Me. Nope. But that explained so much. I also got a second opinion just in case and it turns out I absolutely am ADD. Thanks doc. LOL. When I was in high school I was hospitalized for being suicidal. My doctor there told me some really brilliant advice that totally cleared things up for me. Basically just fixing me on the spot. You just have to be a normal boy. LOL. And to think that he gets paid for that crap. I had been suicidal every day for over a year. When I was 14/15 I started seeing my first therapist. After a few sessions she told me I was too happy to be in therapy and kicked me out. And it messed me up a lot LOL. I've been told almost that same thing. I suffer from severe social anxiety but get me one-on-one. I compensate by being too eager and talkative. They always tell me I'm too upbeat for anxiety and depression. On the bright side, I did finally end up with a good one. After 5 or 6 sessions I was about to schedule my next appointment when my therapist said she wouldn't continue seeing me because she should spend her time on patients who have real problems. I didn't see another therapist again for, like, 15 years. Context: I work a lot from an existential perspective. At this time I was working at a jail and talking to a guy who hitches rides on trains. We were talking about what he would have to do to change his life. To not just get high and ride trains. He looked me square in the eyes and told me he's freer than anyone else he comes across. He isn't indebted to a 40+ hour work week, bills, or debts. He just hangs out with friends and travels state to state. He articulated how he knows he'll die young from missing a jump, but that ultimately he'll have lived and died as he wanted to. It was a conversation that really forced me to be cognizant of human freedom and choice. He wasn't disordered. He had chosen his own path and conclusion. The only thing he was doing wrong was breaking the status quo, the law. Frankly, who am I to judge or decide how to live a life? From then on, I was more careful to never tell a patient how to live or what to do. I'm only here to help someone think through their life and pick their desired direction. I have come to use a lot of sophist techniques to get patients to their own eureka moments. I think this illustrates what most people don't realize, and that's that as therapists, we learn from our clients as well. I learn something from every person I see. Went to a psychologist when I was probably 13. I had depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder, and they often manifested in bad panic attacks and anger. After seeing him a few times and telling him everything, he brought my parents into the room and proceeded to tell them that I was fine. I was just angry at my parents and seeking attention. I tried protesting and explaining myself, but he refused to listen and tried arguing with me. Needless to say, I never went back there and my parents took me to a new psychologist. It definitely fricked me up a lot, and even thinking about it makes me angry. That's definitely a legit reason to be angry. That's such an invalidating and rude thing to say. The only thing that caught me off guard was when my client, after 3 weeks of acting more aloof than anyone I've ever met, admitted that he was only in therapy to get his mom off his back for having a hard time getting to sleep, which he thought meant severe anxiety. I spent the time in between speaking to my supervisor on how to touch on possible severe trauma. I felt like an idiot, but he kept coming back, so I imagine I was useful in some way. I'm really messed up. Been hospitalized a lot. I go through moments of such intense delusions that I'm no longer myself. I was admitted once, after trying to get my veins out of my arm, thinking they were wires. The doctor that was assigned to me wasn't really expecting me to be so paranoid. While in the observation room, he was trying to talk to me and I blurted, "What's it like being a robot, Mr. Robot Man?" I said, "Man, kind of like Moana," and he started laughing. He wasn't expecting it. I wasn't either. I laughed with him. He was such a nice East Indian man, and hearing anyone with the same accent makes me feel lighter somehow. That's actually really wholesome. But holy crap, trying to rip your veins out of your arm has to be the most intense thing I've ever heard. Hope you're doing better. Super late, but hopefully someone gets to enjoy this story as much as I tried not to. I was working with the elderly in long-term care facilities, mostly nursing homes but some fancier types. This happened at a nursing home. I had this great client. She was fully verbal and talkative, spunky, energetic. For a few sessions I could not figure out why they had referred her to me. Eventually it became clear. She was exceptionally delusional. She talked about how Bill Riley had left her $30K at the courthouse and how he talked to her and was interested in her story. She talked about how her evil daughter finally brought her to the home after the police told her she had to do something with my client because she was calling the police, frequently reporting an intruder that was not there. The intruder was Eric, a medical doctor who could shrink himself down to the size of a penny and would hide in her vents, waiting for her to go to sleep so he could perform experiments. I rolled with it. Her reality is terrifying. No wonder she's distressed. One day I came to visit and she started with the usual. Her room got moved to a park and Eric and his colleagues shrunk themselves down. And I was rolling with it. But then, she told me that they went inside her vagina, had a picnic, and she's been picking out little animal bones and fur from her snatch all day. She was pissed they didn't clean up after themselves. I think maybe I had gotten so used to the stories that I was just sort of half paying attention when I realized what she was talking about. Wait, what? They threw a barbecue in your vagina yet? I think this is the only time I had to literally bite my lips, cheeks, tongue to try to not laugh. Not that this woman's condition is hilarious, but a barbecue in your vagina? I wasn't prepared. A few weeks later she busted the windows in her room with her walker because she thought Bill O'Reilly was outside and the staff wouldn't let him in to see her. God, I miss that woman. She was truly great, and not because of the stories. Despite her delusions she was sharp and witty, and generally just an awesome person to be around. R.I.P. Living with a delusional person was one of the most annoying experiences of my life. She insisted she was a billionaire but all these famous people were conspiring to keep her money from her. She also insisted she was the smartest person in the world and had literally every degree there was, even though she didn't know anything about them. The list of crap she believed goes on and on. When my psychologist told me as a 16-year-old that I will never recover and that I should prepare for a struggling life. Not a psych, a patient. I was in hospital after having had a suspected miscarriage of a very much wanted child. The hospital knew about my mental health history so they wouldn't release me without having spoken to a psychiatrist. It was Sunday morning so the dude wasn't on site. So I'm lying in a hospital bed and they bring in a phone and the psych is on the other end. I say hello and he says, so I've heard you had a miscarriage. Me. Well, that's what they think. It's not certain yet but, psych. So are you going to kill yourself if we send you home? I was like, what the frick? No empathy, or how are you feeling about this, or do you have loved ones at home? Just, like, let us know if you're killing yourself or not. I said I'm not sure. Probably not. Apparently that was good enough and they sent me home an hour later. Good news though, it wasn't a miscarriage. I just had HCG levels that were low, but by no means abnormal for early pregnancy. My son is now 19 months old, and I decided not to kill myself. I'm sorry that happened to you. Freaking yikes. Congrats on your son. I hope he and you both are doing okay now. I am a MH worker. I was meeting with one guy for the first time. He was grandiose, which is always kind of fun, in my opinion. While grandiose, people will sometimes claim extraordinary powers, great intelligence, strength, etc. He had been showing me how incredibly high he could jump, not that high, and offering to display feats of strength if I could just give him some heavy stuff to lift. We were waiting for his treatment team to show up and maybe do a med adjustment. Then, things changed. He told me he knew me, or about me. He started telling me things about myself professionally and some surface personal stuff a long-time client might know. But I just met this guy. At first he said he was psychic, but then laughed and said he just knew another client I was working with. A relief. He said he knew her really well. I saw her at least once a week, had for a couple of years, and I had never heard of him. Also, I knew her to be happily married. I initially shrugged it off, but he pulled out his phone and played a video with him and my other client giggling in bed. I tried not to look at it, but I could. Completely avoid it. He was apparently her secret boyfriend on the side. Between the details about me from this guy I had only met 30 minutes before and the revelations about my client's secret life I had no clue about, I was thrown. It was a weird hour. The session was very blunt and it was question after question. I was eventually asked about drugs and I hesitated and squeaked. Commonu. The stiff and serious atmosphere cracked at that moment as we both began to giggle. The woman had a serious face up until that point. At the beginning of the session we introduced ourselves and then I proceeded to talk about my increasingly difficult battle with depression. I got a little emotional, but after almost 3/4 of an hour he asked me if I remembered his name. For the life of me I couldn't, and it just totally baffled me as I almost pride myself in being polite and remembering things like that. A psychologist I visited briefly to treat anxiety and depression began telling me really personal details about other clients and their sessions, and not vague stuff. More like he was hearing voices and the voices said they wanted him to kill me. Psychologist. And that was extra scary because he is the owner of the local NFL team. Isn't that scary? Or she was addicted to CN cheating on her husband, who is the owner of the local mall chain. I grew increasingly uncomfortable with these personal anecdotes, and they began to take up larger and larger chunks of our sessions. By the end there, I would have to interrupt her to redirect her back to my issues. I was paying her to help me address them. After all, the last straw was when she left the office for over 15 minutes to go eat lunch, then charged me for a full session. I confronted her, saying I didn't want to hear these private and confidential stories anymore, and that I would prefer to stay focused on my issues during our sessions, as I was hoping she could teach me how to work through them. Crazy, right? She immediately raised her voice at me and tried to tell me I was imagining the whole thing and having some sort of delusion, an issue I've never been diagnosed with or struggled with. Then she backpedaled and tried to say that all those stories had been from her imagination, meant to benefit me. I pointed out the contradiction and expressed that I didn't want to spend large chunks of our sessions talking about people in her personal life, imaginary or otherwise. That's when she cracked up and told me that I wasn't worthy of someone with her talents, and could never hope to achieve mental health. I walked out and haven't been back to therapy since. Got into a supportive community, and they helped me heal, without gaslighting me or breaking confidentiality. What the frick? My psychologist's jaw dropped to the floor when I explained why a good percentage of my body was always covered in scars or bandages. It was from a mix of self-harm and from other miscellaneous things having caused a lot of harm to me. He ended up writing it all down and it totaled to a 2-page list. The majority of it was things like broken ribs from having an aluminium canoe thrown at me when I was 4 and having been stabbed repeatedly with a Bowie knife. This caught him off guard because I apparently always seemed unnervingly calm to him and didn't outwardly show any signs of significant childhood injuries, and due to one of my hobbies being boxing, I've seen pictures of people with self-harm scars all over their body. It's so surreal even to someone who has self-harmed. Hope you're doing good, man. I had a religious therapist once tell me I just needed more water to solve my depression. She concluded this by having me hold out my arms and she tested the strength of each one by pushing down on it and I had to resist against it. Like really? Looking back I should have told her it was BS, but I was so caught off guard I was just like, well okay, I'll have some more water. If only it was that simple. I feel like religious therapists are usually not a great way to go. I was at the psychiatric ER and they were short-staffed, so a DR from another department had to help me. When I was describing my symptoms of depression and suicidal ideation, he was like, "Don't do that." Okay doctor, I guess I'm cured. Haha. Luckily I was immune to his crap, as I know by now a lot of doctors are really smart but at the same time really crappy when dealing person to person with people. Got some new meds and got out of there unfazed. Patient perspective. When I open up about my trauma to them, I've had multiple therapists, and they get tears in their eyes and are speechless, which makes me just sit there like, I don't think it's that bad, questioning whether it was really that bad and shocking. It's also strange to see them get teary, but I think it helps me feel a connection. My sister got told by a therapist, as a child, that she was just stubborn and that was the reason for acting out, not the fact that we were being sexually abused for years, and no one dug deeper into why she was acting that way. But a nice thing that caught me off guard is my most recent therapist coming with me to try and get me moved out of the house I'm in due to emotional abuse, and she technically wasn't allowed to do that and went against her job rules. However, I had major anxiety and she helped so much. Even if I'm still stuck in this hellhole, she risked her job for me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.